Start by introducing yourself and telling us why and how you started playing Eve.
Yeah, so my name's Komo Sunder, and I've told this story a few times at this point, and but I like it. So when I first walked into the world of Eve, I really didn't have any other games to play. At the time, I owned a Mac, and back in 2012, you really had two options. You had WoW and Eve, and I wasn't jumping on the WoW bandwagon, so I jumped into Eve instead, knowing very little about the game. I understood that it was a spaceship game, and that seemed kind of cool to me. So I stepped in the game. I didn't have a friend group that joined me. Didn't know anybody that had played the game at the time. So I walked through the door learning the game the hard way. Right. I think it took me 30 minutes to realize that I could leave the grid that I was on and move to a gate. Um, but with that said, of course, this is back before they've made changes to the new player experience. Um, I I started a character about a year ago and ran through the new player experience, complete 180. But back then it wasn't that. I was just kind of roaming around a couple systems, um, roaming around a couple systems trying to teach myself how to play this game. Um, but I loved it. Right now, once I started figuring out some of the mechanics and moving into it, the complexity of Eve really drew me in, and I've been hooked ever since.
Very cool. So your course here, candidating, campaigning. Sorry, it's getting late. For CSM19, what are 3 of your campaign points?
So I can really boil down my campaign to one statement, and that is a growing Eve is a healthy Eve. Um, Specifically targeting nullsec. Over the last 6 years, we've seen the player base in nullsec really start to die off. People moving to other games because of changes that have been made in nullsec, um, and ultimately seeing the player base within Eve start to drop um, overall. And what I would like to see is opportunity for newer players, newer corporations, newer alliances, smaller alliances to be able to carve out a piece of Eve, and create their own narrative, create their own story in this game. Something that all of us walking in the door want to see. And that's what's really unique about Eve, right? You can come into Eve and you can create your own story. It's not the same as a lot of other linear MMOs, where you're just another guy running around with a sword and a shield, doing the same thing as everybody else. You can have a story that's unique to yourself, and I think that that's something that needs to be influenced, or I'm sorry, needs to be focused on in this game.
Okay, so then we're going to go ahead and jump right into the rest of the questions. What do you think the biggest challenges facing new players in Eve is?
The biggest challenge facing new players in Eve. Well, I think I kind of touched on that. Um, the biggest challenge is what's the next step, right? Once you are in the game, once you are in the game, you've learned the basic mechanics of the game. You understand. You understand how to run. You understand how to run missions. You know how to go and mine. You've realized that there are people in high sec that'll just kill you without any regard to themselves, right? Once you've got to that point, where's the next step, right? A lot
Yeah.
of new players, you see them start falling off around that 6 month mark, um, and um, just through my experience, through the friends that I've had that have joined and played the game and fallen off of Eve, um, a lot of that is because they don't know what that next step is. There is no linear path in this game, which is a good thing and it's a bad thing.
Mm.
Um, but you get to that point where you really don't know what that next step is, and it's not clear to you. or it's impossible to either see, and if you can see, it's impossible to achieve. I think that's the biggest challenge, making sure people know at that 6 or 7 month mark, what that linear progression looks like for that player, be it moving into faction warfare, moving into nullsec or NPC null, um, whatever that next step is after you've mastered ISEC, right?
So, are you guys finding enough newer players to recruit?
Um, Not really, right? Like if you step out to the space around um, the new player starting systems, right? You'll find one of two things. Yes, you're going to find a handful of new players that really don't know what they're doing, just trying to burn through the game. But what's more common is finding existing players creating alts, jumping in their ship, skipping the tutorial, and just burning out. Or maybe it's maybe you're going to see a lot of spam from an alt corporation that is really designed to try and attract newer players, and use it kind of as a feeder for larger corporations. I've been guilty of it. My corporation tried setting up a high sec corporation to bring in new players and teach them the ropes, with ultimately with the goal of bringing them into the group and into the fold as they progress through the game. And what we found is there's just not a lot of them,
Mm-hmm.
right? They exist, they exist, but 8 out of 10 pilots that you contact say, hey, let's do stuff. You want to learn the game? I want to help you. Um, they're an alt of somebody,
Right.
or they've been created for malicious means, right?
Right.
And it's really difficult um, to find that new player that isn't already connected somewhere.
Do you guys find it hard to compete with like Goons and Pandemic Horde, who are known for having this great new player organization? To get the new players coming in.
Yeah, yes and no. I think that they're running into a lot of the same issues, though. The structure there is much better defined, right? And there's other groups out there as well that have very well defined organizations that they've developed to target the new players. Uh, but they run into those same issues, right? Who is this person? Let's talk about Pandemic Horde, right? It's a huge problem that they run into, bring in spies and
Mm-hmm.
AWOXers and things like that. Which hats off to them. They've continued their model, and they have things in place to try and protect their ESI gated community, I believe is what they refer to it as. Um, and continue to engage those new pilots, knowing that there's a really good chance that that person may have poor intent against them. So yeah, they have that structure and there is that challenge, but um, is it necessarily? Do I think people are, those organizations are stripping that opportunity away? I don't know. I think it's more along the lines of who can get to that pilot first, as
Right.
opposed to hey, I have all the bells and whistles.
Mm-hmm.
Fact is, a new pilot has no idea, right?
Yep.
They don't know what the bells and whistles are and who the big groups are. They just want to find a community. They want to play with people.
So for the people that are non-solved null, there is a perception that the nullsec corps are trying to bring players in really early. Usually, the advice you see on Reddit is, go out to null, straight out. What do I do? Go out to null. When do you think is about the appropriate in-game age for someone to actually think about null?
You know, that's a good question because I have seen people move out to Null that are really, really young and do a great job. Like they do a fantastic job walking in the door to nullsec. They really grab a hold of it and take that opportunity. But I've also seen those that just get lost immediately. It's really about who is working with those people. So, for
Mhm.
example, in Applied Anarchy in our corporation, we have a minimum of 15 million skill points. I think that's a good place for somebody that doesn't have somebody holding their hand and teaching them how to run through Solve and learn nullsec, right? But if we have a friend of a member in the corporation, or we have a friend group that joins together, um, that's something that we'll set to the side, right? Because we know that they have a sponsor to teach them and hold their hand through nullsec. Now, are they going to lose stuff? Yeah, they're going to lose stuff, right? We all lose stuff in nullsec. That's part of the fun of it, right? If you're not losing ships and you're not blowing stuff up, then I mean,
You're not even playing.
you're not really playing. Exactly. Um, but they learn, right? Because they have somebody to mentor them through that. And I
Right.
think that's something that's important. That's important in the game. That's really important to retain that pilot in the game, right? The worst thing that can happen is they feel like they can't move forward,
Right.
right? Like they take two or three steps forward and they get knocked back four, and they feel like they just cannot get a foothold. And that's really the biggest fear coming out to 0-0 too early. You can't make you see the people with 12 jump freighters, and you see the Titans and the super carriers, and you think, oh, I want that looks really cool, I need one of those. um, but you can't keep a positive wallet, because every time you undock to shoot a rat or mine a rock, somebody has a dictor bubble on you.
Right.
Right. So it's really important to have
Yeah.
somebody say, hey, don't go out to mine that asteroid belt. There are 15 neutrals in local. You're probably going to die. It's important to have that person in your pocket.
So, do you find that there's a bit of a problem with people injecting skills and then coming out? And so they're really young in the game. They injected those 15 mil, and
Honestly, no. I know the idea of the skill injectors, and just all the free skill points that we have in the game nowadays. They're frowned upon because is it fair that they can do that or not? Is it safe for somebody to inject into a dreadnought and try to warp it to a high set gate? Um, no, probably not. But you know what I've seen in practice, there are and I'm thinking of one specific person that's actually in our corporation. He's a relatively young pilot who's new to the game, and he injected into a lot of the skills, right? But he also spent the time learning the game and understanding the game. And at where we are right now, he's having a blast. He's having a lot of fun, and it's content that really wouldn't be open to him at this point if skill injectors didn't exist. So I'll tell you that I'm kind of on the fence there. I can see where it's not a great thing, but in the same thing, I can see where it is a good thing and where it has helped new players and given them the opportunities to play the game in a way that they wouldn't otherwise be able to.
okay. So, listening to you, it sounds like community is really important out in nullsec. What does community in Eve mean to you?
Well, and a good friend has this saying that Eve is just a social experiment, right? Um, Everything about this game is really that social community, right? Without it, the game's boring, right? If I was logging in today and I didn't have somebody to jump on comms with or chat with in corp chat, or push back and forth in a Discord chat. Um, I don't know if I could stay entertained in this game, right? Most of Eve is that pilot on pilot interaction. It is so important to keep the community of Eve thriving, and keep it engaged.
Right.
So what does community mean? right? It's the friends that you have made here, and those that you might make in the future, you will make in the future. The acquaintances and those people that you've had to make deals with just to move things forward. That orca sitting in an ice belt in high sec that's just inviting everybody in, so they have people around to communicate with, to have fun with, to play a game with. So that's what community and Eve is to me.
So
It's everything.
I personally, I've only been playing almost 5 years in January. Uh, my very first community that I fell into was the MPSI community, and I can remember a big debate going on Reddit. Like I say, this is about 4 years ago, where the MPSI community is not a real community. What do you feel about basically those communities that have no representation in the game?
Those communities that have no representation in the game. So specifically the NPSI communities, which is just a group of people that are
Public
getting
groups,
together
yeah.
just to have content. Yeah, that's a community, right? That's a very important community in the game. That is community. I'm in a lot of the NPSI discords, and the communication and the talking within those discords, the activity in those discords are not unlike what you would find in a traditional a corp discord or an alliance discord. Just because they don't all share that same tag at the top right, at the same tag, corp tag or alliance tag, doesn't make them any less of a community.
So you've been around for a while. Would you say that toxicity is less than it used to be in Eve, or is it still like a huge problem?
It's always going to be there, right? Is it better or worse than it used to be? No, you're always going to have people. There's always going to be extortion in this game. There's always going to be trolling in this game. There's so long as you have individuals communicating with each other, um, you're going to have that happen, right? I think it's a problem to a degree, right? You shouldn't sit outside of should not sit outside of a Nubro system and just harass everybody that's sitting there. Um, but yeah, people get ganked in the game. A lot of people consider that toxic behavior. It's a very important part of high sec. Everybody understands that there is nowhere safe in
Yeah.
Eve.
So
You know,
just for clarification, I'm not considering ganking or PvP. You know, you guys out there blowing each other's face off and nullsec, the propaganda, all that type of stuff. Really, that's Eve. What I'm talking
yeah.
about is all the stuff from the real world that we really shouldn't even be considering in 2024 and bringing that into the game.
You're talking about
Racism and
racist and
yeah, all
anti-Semitic
that's
behaviors
yeah,
and whatnot. No, there's no room for that. I mean, there's no room for that anywhere, right? That shouldn't even be out in the real world, in my opinion. People are different,
yep,
but you know, okay. I know there are people different than me. There are people that believe things different than I do, but I'm not going to directly attack them for it.
right.
And I'm sure as heck not going to go after somebody because of race or belief. Um, I mean, that's just ridiculous. And no, we come into Eve, we engage in this hobby because we interact with the people here, and anything that draws a wedge between that in a malicious and hateful way has no business being in the game. Um, and I would uh, I think that CCP has made it very clear that they're not tolerant of it either.
Yep. So, what do you do when you personally encounter it? Either within corporation, the alliance, your discords, and websites.
So I'll be completely transparent on this. Um, uh, Me as a person, I believe in second chances in this game. If somebody has burned themselves, they have conducted behavior that is just atrocious. If they have denounced those actions and they truly believe that what they said was or what they did was in bad taste and formally apologized for those actions, I'm willing to give somebody like that a second chance, um, knowing knowing well that if it doesn't change, they're gone. Right? It's not a fact of it's not a fact of how lenient am I with some of this behavior. Um, my leniency is zero, right? That we don't do that. It's not okay. But if somebody has made a joke in bad taste and they've come to me and said, I'm sorry, I apologize, my Eve career is over. Um, in this game, nobody's going to talk to me. I'll sit down with them. I'll say, hey, I will give you a shot, but know that that's not acceptable behavior, and there won't be any more second chances after this. And there have been, I can think of two names, which I'm not going to throw out here, where that did become an issue, and it's unfortunate for that individual. But if you can't change and you can't move away from that type of belief system, maybe this isn't the game for you.
Okay, so now we are going to move into what's become my favorite section of these interviews. You made it to the CSM19. Congratulations. The very first meeting that you go into, it's revealed to you about what's going to be on the next expansion, maybe the next couple expansions. But nothing that you have campaigned for or want to accomplish as CSM is really on the table. What do you think you're going to do?
So the entire idea of running for CSM for me, even up to this point, is to bring exposure to what um, I feel would benefit this game. And yeah, I am that null set candidate that wants to see null set grow to a point where it once was, where it was a thriving environment in this game. Um, and I realize that CSM doesn't always have full control over that, but it does give me a platform to expose it and say, hey, this is something that needs to look at. That can't be ignored at that point, right? They have to listen to it. They don't necessarily have to do anything about it, but at least I can, at least I have a platform to push that forward. Now, going back to your question, what do I do if nothing that's brought up within the CSM fits inside my campaign, my campaign points? I'm not sure if that exists, because my goal is to see Eve grow, right? And that's where I'm going to push. If absolutely nothing is touched on 0-0, if nothing's touched on low sec and everything is focused on high sec, I think there's a lot of opportunity to create um, uh, advice that raises the tide in all of Eve. If we have a ton of players coming into the game engaging into low sec, or I'm sorry, engaging in high sec, for example, they're going to split off and they're going to naturally progress into null sec. Um, so no, I feel that even if I can't directly influence the changes in the game around what I would like to see, I think I can indirectly influence those. There's always going to be something that touches. There's always going to be something that touches every area of this game that's going to be brought up.
Okay. And then, of course, if we play the game long enough, CCP is going to touch something that we care about or our community cares about. They're going to nerf it, they're going to, change it, or they're going to get rid of it completely. I'm sure we all can think of a few things. What would you do if this is going to happen during your term, but it's because CCP wants to make the game better? Let's say drone assist. I know that this CSM19 candidates really want to axe drone assist, and it's actually an integral part of my gameplay with incursions.
So the question is really if there's something coming through that I personally believe is going to be good for the game, but is generally an unpopular um, move to unpopular choice by the community. Um, I have to stick with the community, right? So I know I don't know everything. I like to think I know quite a bit about Eve. I feel like I have a wealth of knowledge, but the fact of the matter is I don't know everything. I don't know everybody's perspective, and if there is an overwhelming roar saying this is bad, maybe it's bad.
Okay. And then there are a lot of communities out there that don't have a CSM representative. I mean, I think CSM18 is the first time Incursions got one. Really, MPSI got one. Um, yeah. So there's a lot more that really don't have one. Are you going to be interactive with people if they come to ask you questions or help with their concerns?
Well, let's boil down where I'm coming from, right? So, yeah, I'm in the initiative, right, and I have a lot of respect for the leadership in my alliance, but everybody in initiative leadership, they found out about me running for CSM with the rest of you when it was announced. Um, that's because my stance on things aren't necessarily directed towards the null block. There are a lot of things that I believe would improve this game that aren't necessarily uh, things that the null block is going to say, oh, that's a fantastic idea, right? I want to see a nerf to ansiblexes. I want to see my my force projection go down. Um, but my perspective of this game is not sitting in a null block. It is the creation and development of an independent alliance, and my experience in doing that with chaos theory, and understanding that there are certain things that need to change to see an overall growth in this game. Um, with that said, I also know that there are a lot of individuals in this game that are sitting in that seat right now in that independent mid-size alliance or that new alliance is trying to break into null that need a voice and they don't have the numbers to push through a candidate, or maybe there's just too much conflict between those groups to say, okay, I'm going to vote your person through. Um, my entire goal is to try and bring a voice to those groups and those organizations. So there is meaningful influence in this game that benefits them as well as the blocks in nullsec.
Okay. And then the last question in this particular line is players sometimes have expectations of the CSM that we're going to go in and we're going to fix things or we're going to start demanding CCP change things. Have you given any thought on how you're going to balance your duty as CSM, which is basically an advisor to CCP, and of course we have that pesky NDA, with making people feel heard?
Um, you know, I would love to see a little bit more visibility um, from from the game developers and the Eve community. Um, that would be fantastic. I'd love to see test servers, at least to a degree, come back online so people can start experimenting with stuff. Um, it's very difficult to it's very difficult to defend your position and defend your decisions without having that transparency. I also understand that that very well may never change, right? Um, it's more so knowing that yes, I did voice this concern. If somebody comes to me and says this is a real problem, and I agree, it is a real problem. Um, uh, uh, Having the proper mechanism to say, okay, yes, I am going to bring this up, and this is how I'm going to bring it up. and being able to relay that back to those individuals. Um, Really, you can't turn around and say, "Hey, this is how it was managed and this is how it was discussed." You can't do that. But so long as somebody understands that there's a real mechanism, a real practice in place where you can voice it and you can get it out in front of the rest of the members of CSM and the developers. I think that's going to to help alleviate some of those concerns
Okay.
because the fact is a lot of the community in Eve, they've lost all trust in the CSM,
Mm-hmm.
and that's going to be something that's really really hard to repair, especially if we don't open up um, some of that transparency of what is being thought of, what's being worked on, um, and what can we expect down the road. It's really boils down to, hey, yes, I will bring this up. Will it get fixed? I hope so, but this is how I'm going to do it, and let them understand of where you are in the process of bringing up those topics, not necessarily informing all of Eve of what's coming from those topics.
Right. Okay, so sounds like you have a pretty good idea of, what it is to be CSM, at least from my experience. And now we're going to go into one of my less favorite topics, multi-boxing. This is a community question that I've been asked to ask all of the CSM candidates because on one half of my community, everyone multi-boxes, home fronts, incursions, mining, stuff like that. The other half think that we should all have one account, maybe even get rid of, characters 2 and 3. What's your stance on multi-boxing?
Well, that's a really big variance right there, right? It's
Yep.
only one character or 25, right?
Yeah,
You get
pretty
to pick
much. I
one or
know.
the other.
Nothing in between.
So, so I am famously a multi-boxer. Um, do I run 25 accounts? I don't run 25 accounts. Usually it's 5 or 6. Um, and really that's extensive for most pilots. I think the average is 2 or 3, 2 or 3 accounts for people that do multi-box in this game. Um, I think really the big issue that I run into is some of the problems that you run into if you're not multi-boxing, just designed into the game, um, make it necessary. At least 2 accounts. It's almost impossible to progress in this game without 2 accounts. Should it be that way? No, not necessarily. Is it that way? Unfortunately, there's no safer way to move a capital or your jump freighter than light your own Sino, and it's not realistic to go and drop a Sino beacon, come back to your ship, and then jump to that deployable structure. Which that was really neat thing that they added in the game. But you almost have to, at least the the world of E that we live in right now. It's very difficult to survive with just one account.
So, another question that I've been asked several times for my CSM18 candidacy as well over this past year. What do you think about giving all new players coming into the game, like say from today on, all of the skills in the Magic 14? So they would get everything in the Magic 14 up to 5.
I think there's a precedent for that, right? If you look over the history of Eve, um, when a skill becomes a requirement, right? You really can't engage in the game until this skill is trained, right? I think the biggest example of this were the training skills, right? Um, if you didn't put those into your skill queue as soon as you logged into the game, then you're one step behind everybody else, just from the get-go. And then they turned around and removed those from the game because that's what you had to train first before you could really even engage. Um, all the Magic 14, I don't know. Um, I think there is an element to some of those skills that that have a place in the training tier for people learning the game. Though there are a few that they really make sense to go ahead and either remove and just put them in as a base for everybody, or loading them out to 5. So it's another one of those questions where I can be on either side of the fence, but there is precedent for it. I wouldn't jump up and down if they went through and said, okay, everybody gets Magic 14 right off the bat. Okay, right? That's not going to change the way that I play this game, and it may very well change the way that a new player plays this game.
So let's say that CCP does decide to do this, and the vets are pissed because they walk to school both ways uphill in 5 feet of snow with the wind against them, and because they had to, everyone else should have to. What would you say to those vets?
Well, I also lived in the world where you lost skill points when you lost a T3 cruiser, or you forgot to plug in your medical clone, you just lost Carrier 5, right? Or those individuals that lost Titan 5, I think a couple times. I lived in that world too, but that's not a world that is going to grow this game. And everybody sits down at this game. They need people to play with, and unless we take simple things like base requirement skills and base requirement skills and remove that as a barrier for people playing the game, we're not going to have anybody to play with. People are going to walk away. Yes, they come back. A lot of people come back, but we have to have that new blood coming in. And if all that takes is, hey, we're going to give you 5 different skills when you start up. Great, give them 5 different skills when they start up. I'm happy with it. And I would imagine that most vets out there are also going to be happy with it. There'll be a very small percentage of people that say it's not fair that they didn't have to train this. Well, I hate to break it, guys, but there are a lot of skills that are inherently given to the new pilot now, that weren't given to the new pilot, 10 years ago. So,
And then the last question that I have for you, well, almost the last question, is CCP seems to really want to get new players out in faction warfare as their first encounter with like PvP, losing a ship, interacting with people. But going from the career mission to faction warfare, there's no bridge. If CCP had decided to work on this, would you have any ideas or suggestions on how to move forward?
moving from transitioning from that high sec point
Yep.
to low sec, right, is really what we're asking here.
Yep.
How would we do this? You know, I think people naturally move in that direction to begin with, either from high sec to null sec, but it kind of pulls back to that concern that we ran that I mentioned before. You get to that 6 month 6 month point or so, and you get kind of lost, right? You don't have anything directing you to nullsec or to faction warfare or to wherever, right, into wormhole space. And I also believe if we're looking at directing to faction warfare, we probably need to direct to other areas as well. Um, possibly finding possibly finding an area where you have to moonlight into that particular space for rewards. Maybe something like high rewarding level 5 missions that you start in high sec, but you have objectives that may pull you into faction warfare. You have to go grab a plex, or you have to do something like that. So long as the reward is viable to endure that type of risk, people are going to find a way to push through that and move into that content, and then slowly progress from that, right? I think that's what I would like to see, but I don't want to see it just with faction warfare. I would like to see it with other areas of the game too, because faction warfare is not the only spot that needs to grow. A lot of areas in this game need to see that player base grow for it to be healthy again.
Yeah, I do agree with that. So then here is the overarching question. What do you think is the number one most pressing issue in Eve today? It could be stuff we talked about, it could be stuff we haven't discussed yet.
I mean, we've talked about it twice now. It's getting people over
Well,
that hump of I've learned Eve, and what's next. That that's the overwhelming issue that I think the developers in this game fight every single day. How do we keep people engaged in this game once you hit that mark and you feel like you've learned everything when you clearly haven't, right? You haven't touched everything, but you feel like it's either too much of a bump to get into that next phase of the game or that next phase of your Eve experience. And it's just easier to go download something on Steam, right? And go poke at that for a little while and maybe forget about Eve for a while and come back to it, realize this is a hard game. I'm going to go back to, whatever, right?
right.
I go back to Fortnite because I can just jump on it and start shooting people. Um, but I think that's the biggest issue that we face is retaining players at that point. Um, and as you said, there's a framework of what could happen there, but there's nothing built into the game intentionally yet
Yep.
to help those players facilitate those players transitioning to those other areas that the end game of Eve, right?
So I'm going to open up the floor to any Twitch questions. I do have one. Someone asking you to tell about your Magic 14.
Okay, so that's really funny. So we were setting up our corporation off and um, different groups on the Magic 14, and or one of the requirements for one of the doctrines that we were using. I think it was our Black Ops doctrine that we use as a corporation. Um, it requires the Magic 14. Well, it turns out that one of my characters, actually my marshal pilot, didn't have the Magic 14 yet. So I think I was missing. It was shield um, shield something 5, and they will never let it go. Hence the fact they're bringing it up in the Twitch stream.
I think once you play long enough, it's always going to happen. I mean, I knew a Bombers Bar FC who never got torpedoes too, T2 torpedoes.
Yeah.
Um, what was it? Kiakti, the CEO of Fun Inc., there's something that he's never trained into. So I think we all have those little things that we've never trained into.
Yeah,
uh,
and I didn't realize it, and I'll tell you, I still don't think I have it on that character. No, I'll have to go back and check.
as a CEO of a corp, how many hours in the day or week is logged in and doing things, or are you logged in and doing things? And how would it affect your corp if you were a member of the CSM? Oh, good question.
Um, I want to double check to see if that's actually my corp asking that question. Um, oh, it is. It is. You guys are throwing the hard ones at me here. Uh, yeah, absolutely. Right. When the question of how do you make time came up from CCP Swift and CCP Lumi during the CSM interviews with CCP. Um, my answer was to, a lot of us already spend a lot of time in this game. If you're running for CSM and you want to make that impact, you're probably already putting 20 hours into this game, just organizing and pushing things forward. And that time has to, the time dedicated to CSM has to come from somewhere. So a lot of that pulls from the time that you're already using to build your communities, build um, um, uh, uh, build communities, build the infrastructure around the aspects that you find important in the game. Luckily, with Applied Anarchy, I have a really strong team of directors and a co-CEO that can easily step in at any time to take over those duties and make sure things continue to push forward. It's um, when you have a large, strong corporation, it can't just be one person at the helm running everything. You have to have people at multiple levels to make sure that content keeps moving, that
Yep.
finances are on par, that people joining the corporation are having a good experience.
Yep.
Right? They're integrating with the community that you've helped build. Um, so no, I'm really lucky with that. I'm really lucky with the leadership that I have in Applied Anarchy.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that the CEOs, community leaders that have grown a very strong, healthy community and a very strong, healthy leadership team that you can delegate to, that 100% makes it so much easier.
I want to point out the person asking that question is my co-CEO, so he very much so knows what would happen. It would just be enjoy.
So, another question is if a new player begins in Eve while knowing 0 people who play it, how would one get started with meeting and building relationships? Another good question.
Um, you know, yeah, that's a great question, and the fact is that's one that I live. Right, you walk in the door and you don't know anybody. Um, how do you make that first contact? Join a corporation, right? If you have a bunch of people that are lost on the undock of that new bro system, talk to them, poke them, say, hey, what are we doing? Everybody shrugs their shoulders and say, I don't know, but let's do it together. That's how I moved forward. I found some people that joined about the same time or started playing the game about the same time I did, and we decided that we're going to learn how to play Eve together. And that would be my advice: find somebody, join a corporation, even if it's a small group of 2 or 3 guys, or a big group um, um, like Horde or Pandemic Horde or Karma Fleet, something like that, or Brave Newbies. Um, get in there and learn the game, build a relationship with people. Right, that's what most of us are here to do anyway.
All right, guys, this is the 0 hour. If you have any more questions, type those furiously in. And if people have been watching the stream or they see the video on YouTube later, how are they going to keep the conversation going with you?
So it's really easy, guys. I'm on the Eve Discord. Just poke me. I've had a lot of people poking me with questions about the game, my experience, what my viewpoint is on very specific topics. I love fielding those questions. Um, Poke me. It's easy. I'm out there, or you can poke me in game. That's fine too. I spend a lot of time on Eve, but the easiest way is through Discord, guys. Just Komo Sunder. You can find me on the Eve Discord.
Okay, so it looks like Twitch chat doesn't have any more questions, so you're off the hook. I
Hot
want to
dog.
I want to thank you so much for coming. Oh wait, one more. You get one more. Would you make missions gain more experience or gain events for certain events?
Well, I mean, first off, I don't have a whole lot of control over that. But I like the idea. Like I said, I think that missions have a good place in the game, and can be used as a mechanic to push people into or outside of their comfort zone. But I mean, a lot of missions really don't have a good reward. I think you mentioned in I think you mentioned in your interview with Brexy earlier about a lot of people gravitating to mining
Mining,
as
yep.
opposed to other aspects because it's easy. You can grab a retriever, go into a belt, and just start cycling. Go watch some TV. Um, I think that if we had if we had a way to push people into missions, more regularly or more in a more structured way, we could use that as a mechanic to push people out to that mid or in game content.
Okay. Good answer. And just one more question I have. This one came up during my interview with Frozen, and someone asked me, would I suggest making new players invulnerable for 30 days from ganking? What do you think about that?
I don't know. I don't know. Realistically, ganking is part of the game, and you have to learn it. And there needs to be a pocket where where new players need to be able to learn the game and grow. Um, an all-out ban on ganking for 30 days, I think that can be abusive, especially when 80% of the people, 80% of those new pilots coming into the game really aren't new players. Those are just alts being made. Um, I think that creates a dangerous mechanic. Um, but I would get behind a safe zone that's very clearly identified for new players or existing players, saying, "Hey, you can't gank here, or you just cannot engage other pilots in this space." Um, that's something that's implemented in a lot of games nowadays, just for people to experience the game and learn the game without getting steamrolled by the people that have been playing it for 7, 8, 9, 10 years, and are really there to cause mayhem, right? Having that safety bubble that's very clearly defined. Hey, learn here. Um, I think is probably a good idea. Not necessarily in a time frame window, but maybe geographical.
So CCP already has stated that the career and the tutorial mission systems are sacred, and thou shall not harass or grief new players there. And I think they did put a time limit on it, something like 30 days. Do you think that that should be expanded out a little bit instead of just being one system?
Yeah, I think it should be more than one system because to survive in this game, it's not just one system, right? You maybe give each faction a constellation of systems that are really there for people to learn the game and grow in the game. Um, I mean, it's not going to harm anything, right? If you can't go in there and shoot somebody's retriever in that system, okay, they're getting a little bit more Veldspar. Big deal, and they can't be harassed. Not a problem. Um, but it helped facilitate that new player growth. I think the biggest problem that we run into, yes, it's only one. Whether it's 4 systems in the game. No, I'm sorry, it's
Oh,
is it
geez.
12 systems? 12 systems in the game that are locked down as new bro systems.
It would be
And you're right about
16
that.
because
Is it
also
16? Okay.
the new player uh, MPE system.
Oh, okay, that's right.
Yeah.
They're not clearly marked, to begin with, and there's a lot of activities in the tutorials that send people into danger. For example, I like telling this story because it really makes me look like a horrible person, but it's not meant to. Uh, I found a wormhole, and I put a dictator into a wormhole from the back end. I think it was, I don't know what class it was. It doesn't matter. Um, but I found that there was a high sec hole attached to it. I'm like, okay, I'm going to sit here. I'm going to try to get some content, try to grab some people, and they jump through. And I kept seeing, I want to say it was an amicus um, jump through, and I decloak, I tackle it, I pop it. I'm like, ha 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 ha! I'm a big bad guy. This is great. Cloak back up. 5 minutes later, another one jumps through. I decloak, I pop it. The exact same T1 fit. I'm like, this is really weird. About 4 or 5 T1 scanning frigates come through this hole, and I realize there's something going on. I jump through and I realize that these are new bros that I'm popping, trying to do their scanning missions or
Oh
their
no.
scanning tutorial. And I laugh about it now, but these guys had no idea what they were doing. they're jumping in, like this is a wormhole. They're learning really fast that wormholes are not a safe place. But it kind of creates that talking point. Maybe I shouldn't have been sitting there popping them because they're new bros. Maybe there should have been some sort of a protection there. Now, is that really the direction we need to go with wormholes? I don't know, but there needs to be a little bit more space for that new pilot to explore and interact with the game before they run into the mean people like me sitting in a wormhole with a dictator.
Well said, well said. So, we really are now down to the very end. So, I want to thank you so much for coming and talking to me. It was a lot of fun.
Oh, this has been a great experience. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Best of luck with your campaign. And everyone out there in Twitchland, I will have this video up on YouTube hopefully tomorrow, maybe Saturday.